As the turmoil of the post-war years settled and economic growth advanced, JNR began developing domestically produced diesel locomotives as part of its drive for motive power modernization. Many lines where powerful steam locomotives such as the C62 and D52 had operated were now electrified, and replacing the next tier, the D51 and C57 classes, became an urgent task. Although the DF50, built using imported technology, had already entered mass production, its wheel rim output of around 1,000 horsepower was insufficient. A practical path toward the DD51, capable of roughly 1,400 horsepower at the wheels, had finally emerged. At the same time, manufacturers sought to enter this new market with their own proposals. If successful, these locomotives might even be exported to developing countries that used narrow-gauge railways. Various prototypes were built, employing both electric and hydraulic transmission systems. Among them, the most unusual was the DD91. The transmission systems used in most manufacturer proposal locomotives, whether electric or hydraulic, followed conventional designs. But the DD91 adopted a radically different approach. In transmissions derived from Voith designs, such as that of the DD51, 3 hydraulic torque converters were connected to gears with different reduction ratios, and gear changes were achieved by filling or draining oil from each converter. In contrast, the DD91 used a single hydraulic torque converter combined with a 4-stage gear shifting mechanism. Shifting gears under load in a locomotive powertrain that produces enormous torque is extremely difficult. Forcing a shift would cause violent shocks, damaging gears, and potentially even causing derailments. The challenge was overcome by Maybach of Germany. In an era before high-precision electronic control, they created a highly complex hydraulic control mechanism, a truly eccentric device. Germany, with its long tradition of advanced industrial engineering, successfully applied this system to full-scale locomotives exceeding 2,000 horsepower and achieved mass production. The system was known as the MERKUR transmission. Because it required only one hydraulic converter, it was far smaller and lighter than systems that switched between multiple converters. With 4 gear stages, it maintained high efficiency across a wide speed range and produced strong tractive effort even at low speeds. For Japan, where track conditions were often poor, compact and lightweight power equipment was a critical requirement. The combination of a high-performance, high-speed turbocharged Maybach engine with an efficient lightweight transmission was extremely attractive. In the DD91, the engine capable of producing more than 2,000 horsepower was derated to 1820 horsepower. Even so, its performance difference compared with the DF50, which used an electric transmission and a medium-speed diesel engine, was striking. Compared with the DD51, the DD91 was lighter, with an operating weight of only 70 tons. With one fewer axle load was kept to 14 tons. Its performance in revenue service on the Sannan Main Line and Bantan Line was excellent, prompting Mitsubishi to license the technology and begin domestic production of both the engine and transmission. But this marked the beginning of a difficult chapter. Although Japan's industrial capability had advanced rapidly after the war, in the field of precision mechanical control it still lagged behind Europe and the United States. Moreover, the information provided by the German side for licensed production was limited, and engineers in Japan struggled greatly during development. Despite these conditions, they somehow managed to bring the project together, and the result was the DD54. It was expected to handle everything from low-speed heavy freight to passenger service, and hopes were high that it would contribute significantly to the modernization of non-electrified regional lines, where many freight and passenger trains still operated. With only one engine installed, maintenance was expected to be simpler. However, transmitting power to both end bogies required splitting the output and routing the drive shafts around the single-axle center truck, leaving mechanical concerns unresolved. Although the body was a box shape like the DD91, its angular, stylish, futuristic appearance was unlike anything previously seen in JNR's diesel locomotives. Beneath that modern exterior lay an eccentric transmission system. To perform 4 gear changes while running, the engine had to drop to idle for about 10 seconds during each shift before returning to power. This produced a distinctive running sound, clearly different from the nearly constant RPM acceleration of the DF50 or DD51. Naturally, acceleration was interrupted during each shift, and the resulting jolt was transmitted to the trailing passenger or freight cars. Once revenue service began, various problems emerged. The interruption of tractive effort during power operation became a serious issue when hauling freight on gradients. If wheel slip occurred, the transmission interpreted the sudden rise in speed as a cue to shift gears. The engine dropped to idle and the clutch disengaged, stopping the slip, but the gear had already shifted up. The loss of tractive effort during the shift, combined with the reduced pulling power afterward, caused the locomotive to falter at critical moments, sometimes making it impossible to accelerate on gradients. A countermeasure was introduced. When starting heavy trains on an upgrade, the automatic gear advance function had to be disabled so that the locomotive always started in first gear. Furthermore, if the train stopped on a gradient, the brake valve had to be operated to compress the couplers of the freight cars, similar to the compressed start technique used with steam locomotives. The single hydraulic converter, while contributing to weight reduction, had to operate continuously on long gradients, causing oil temperature to rise. Cracked cylinder heads, transmission malfunctions leading to poor power delivery, and difficulty reversing occurred frequently. Although Takatory Works worked tirelessly on maintenance and improvements, fundamental solutions remained elusive. Then, on June 28, 1968, a major accident occurred. As the down overnight express Oki from Osaka approached Kuyama Station and began slowing to the 70 km/h speed limit, a sudden shock occurred and the locomotive overturned. The following mail car also tilted heavily, and cars up to the sixth vehicle derailed in a zigzag pattern. Fortunately, a mail car and a baggage car were coupled directly behind the locomotive, and although one postal employee was seriously injured, not a single passenger was killed or even hurt. There were 458 passengers aboard the train, and had sleeping cars or coaches been coupled immediately behind the locomotive, the accident could have become a major disaster. The cause of the accident was the detachment of the DD54's drive shaft. It struck a sleeper, forcing the rear bogie upward and causing the locomotive to pitch forward and overturn. The driveshaft joint was a universal joint, and its separation was identified as the cause. Following the accident, the media coined the phrase pole vaulting DD54. Subsequent investigation found no inherent weakness in the drive shaft itself. Since the connecting components had come loose, it was suspected that the repeated violent shocks from the Mikhaidro gear shifting system had contributed to the failure. Another driveshaft detachment occurred the following year. Although it did not lead to a major accident, the fact that it happened on two trains on the same day shocked those involved. After countermeasures were implemented to prevent driveshaft detachment, such accidents faded, but overall mechanical troubles continued. Despite the heavy atmosphere following the accident, the DD54 was honored with the duty of hauling the imperial train that autumn. And in spring 1972, the first blue train on the Sanan region, the Izumo, debuted, giving the DD54 a moment in the spotlight as a limited express locomotive. With its sharp, modern face and the eccentric technology hidden beneath, Mitsubishi's proud DD54 could not overcome its troubles. It never achieved dominance on regional trunk lines and ultimately had a short career. In Germany, the Mikhaidro system competed with Voith transmissions, but Voith ultimately prevailed, and with the rise of electric transmission, hydraulic systems themselves became a minority. While the DD54 struggled with its eccentric transmission, another locomotive appeared being equipped with an eccentric bogie arrangement, the DE10. At the time, large classification yards in major cities handled vast numbers of two-axle freight cars, sorting them by destination through intensive switching operations. Eliminating steam from these yards was an urgent task. In addition, non-electrified branch lines also needed dieselization. A medium-sized diesel locomotive capable of serving both roles was therefore developed. Switching work involved repeatedly pushing strings of freight cars, accelerating, uncoupling the leading car, and letting it roll into another consist a process known as humping or kicking. Because the freight car's brake pipes were not connected, the locomotive alone had to provide all traction and braking. High tractive effort and strong braking were essential, and adhesion performance was critical. Furthermore, for use on branch lines, axle load had to be kept to 13 tons. Meeting both requirements, low axle load and high adhesion, demanded a design that balanced two opposing characteristics. The DD13 had already been mass-produced for switching service and was replacing STM locomotives, but with an axle load of 14 tons and a BB wheel arrangement, it could not meet the new requirements. Thus, the number of powered axles was increased to 5. This created a problem, the 3-axle bogie. On a 3-axle bogie, the distance between the end axles becomes long. On branch lines, where sharp curves and low-number turnouts were common, the increased lateral force would impose speed restrictions. To solve this, an unusual bogie was developed, the AAA bogie, in which each axle was supported by a link mechanism and could move independently in the sleeper direction. With this design, a driving axle weight of 65 tons was achieved, far exceeding the 53 tons of the steam locomotive 9600, which had been widely used for switching. The DE10's weaknesses were its braking weight, which at 68 tons did not match the 9600, and the sluggishness of its reversing mechanism during the frequent forward-reverse cycles of switching, noticeably slower than a steam locomotive. However, its high adhesion at low speeds and the strong tractive effort produced by the low-speed stage of the auxiliary transmission compensated for these shortcomings. Compared with the DD13's 56-ton driving axle weight, the DE10 had a clear advantage. It achieved the required 13-ton axle load, allowing entry into branch lines where the DD13 struggled. And it did so even while carrying an SG for passenger car heating, a truly groundbreaking achievement. Because the DE10 was a modest locomotive intended for switching and local line service, it did not attract much attention at the time. Yet its technical significance was considerable. Moreover, unlike many other eccentric machines that suffered misfortune, the DE10's unusual bogie design proved extremely successful and entered full-scale mass production. From major classification yards to remote rural lines, the DE10 spread nationwide, proudly belching black smoke and roaring with its turbocharged engine. This unusual bogie arrangement was further developed and inherited by the DE50, which carried Japan's first domestically built 2,000 horsepower engine and a large hydraulic transmission. As its number 50 suggests, the DE50 was designed with high-speed running in mind. In performance tests, it ran at 105 km per hour without bogie problems. The next step was also envisioned. If output improvements to the DML61 series engines could be achieved, a 3,000 horsepower DF51 with 2 such bogies was under consideration. It seemed that Japan's diesel locomotives, long lagging behind, might finally reach world standards. But reality followed the pattern already described. Changing social conditions, JNR's decline, and the advance of electrification eliminated the need for large diesel locomotives. Development of high-output diesel locomotives, including the DE50, was halted, and the aging DD51 fleet was kept alive instead. This was also the period when high-performance DMUs were in demand, and the new series DMUs cannot be ignored. Longtime viewers of this channel may be tired of hearing about them, but since the world-unique roof-mounted radiator, that eccentric system, cannot be omitted, I will summarize briefly. The natural cooling roof radiators adopted after the Kiha 90 and 91 originated from the challenge of creating a sleeping car DMU. Although noise reduction, identified as the most critical issue in tests using the Kiha 52, was not achieved, the system offered reduced engine load and effective use of roof space, revealing applications beyond sleeping car DMUs. By eliminating cooling fans, the power loss associated with driving them was removed, producing an effect equivalent to increasing engine output. Fan-driven cooling consumed more than 5% of available power. 5% may seem small, but for the underpowered DMUs of the time, it was a serious amount. Since engineers were desperately trying to improve acceleration and raise balancing speed on gradients to narrow the overwhelming performance gap with EMUs, this was a technology they wanted so badly it hurt. The prototype Kiha 90 and 91 had their roofs covered with dense arrays of cooling fins, pierced by multiple pipes, and lined with silver hexagonal boxes resembling unit coolers. The mechanical beauty of the arrangement was striking. The car body exceeded even the standards of the latest Express EMUs of the era. Although painted in the Express DMU color scheme, its appearance was entirely different from the Kiha 58. The sides of the car body had the same angled profile as limited Express stock, and the cab featured a pronounced backward rake. Curved glass, a unique Typhon cover, and embedded headlights, features absent from Express EMUs, gave it an extravagance unusual for a semi-Express DMU. Although classified as an Express DMU, it was effectively a prototype for limited express service, with a maximum speed of 120 km per hour. The cab design differed completely from earlier DMUs. The master controller used the horizontal axis type adopted on the Shinkansen, and the brake handle was also a fixed horizontal axis design, making it even more advanced than the Shinkansen. The brake system used a self-lap mechanism, allowing braking force to be controlled proportionally to handle rotation angle, providing far more intuitive operation than the automatic brakes of earlier DMUs. The instrument panel, with black as its base color, had markings illuminated by blacklight, causing them to glow as if floating, giving the cab a futuristic, aircraft cockpit atmosphere. A panel resembling today's monitoring systems was installed to alert the driver to abnormalities. Various indicator lights changed color depending on operating conditions, reinforcing the sense of a machine from the future. At night, the cab looked like an entirely different world. The doors used a folding-type mechanism, and stainless steel folding doors were tested on the prototypes. The converter to direct drive shift was automatically controlled according to master controller position. Many new ideas were incorporated. Although the two-stage direct drive system attempted on the Kiha 60 was abandoned, the Kiha 90 and 91 adopted a single-stage, three-element torque converter with minimal torque drop at high speeds, allowing converter operation up to 80 km per hour. This reduced speed loss on gradients of 16.7 to 20 per mil, slopes that earlier DMUs struggled with. However, as repeatedly noted, the natural cooling roof radiators could handle only engines of about 400 horsepower. Attempts were made to cool the roof radiators with electric blowers, but this was insufficient for the DML30 series engines, which approached 600 horsepower maximum output. Thus, the production 181 series required additional forced cooling radiators under the floor. At the time, Japan's internal combustion rolling stock faced multiple disadvantages. Engine technology still lagged behind Europe and America, track conditions were constrained by narrow gauge, and axle load limits were far stricter. Engineers had to find ways to increase performance under these harsh constraints. Their struggle and their sense of purpose was immense. If those engineers could see today's JR companies operating heavy, powerful, high-speed vehicles on strengthened track vehicles that would have been unthinkably heavy in their era, one wonders what they would feel.